Welcome to part 1 of chapter 34, which is on the origin and evolution of vertebrates, of which we are one. So early in the Cambrian period, and remember we talked a little bit about this, the Cambrian explosion, which was about 530 million years ago. There were a lot of invertebrate animals that inhabited the Earth's oceans. One of these species of invertebrate animals gave rise to the vertebrates. And the vertebrates are now known as one of the most successful groups of animals, of which there are lots and lots of species. The animals called the vertebrates get their name from the vertebrae, which is the series of bones that make up the backbone or our skeleton. Well, not the skeleton specifically, but the vertebrae, the spinal bones that are going to have a hollow portion in the middle for the spinal cord. So the phylum Chordata, of which we would call these chordates, they have a notochord and a dorsal hollow nerve cord. So we're going to talk about what this means. They are bilateralan, meaning they are similar on two sides. Animals that belong to the clade of animals known as Deuterostomia. The chordates comprise all vertebrates in two groups of invertebrates, urochordates and cephalochordates. So looking at our tree here, you can see at the base again is your ancestral deuterosome, so Echinodermata, Cephalochordata. You can see again acquisition of different features along the way. Remember, those are derived characteristics, derived shared characteristics. And again, we would look at relationships based on ancestral shared characteristics as well. This is us down here in the mammals. So all chordates share a set of derived characters, as I just mentioned. Some species have some of these traits only during very short periods of time. So a good example of that would be some characteristics that are only exhibited during embryonic development and then go away before that individual is born or comes out of an egg. Four key characteristics of chordates are notochords, dorsal hollow nerve cords. Dorsal means towards the back. Pharyngeal slits or clefts, which we'll talk about, and a muscular postanal tail. So a tail that is behind where the anus would be found, which is the end of the digestive system. So again, these are the basic four characteristics, these derived characters that are shared by all chordates. Let me go back here for a second. Let's see, so notochord, vertebrae, just a few that are listed on here. Okay, so looking at a picture, again, the postanal tail. So here's your anus, there's the mouth, that's your digestive system. So you can see that the tail is behind where the anus is found. Here's your notochord. Here is the dorsal hollow nerve cord. And then you have pharyngeal slits or clefts. These slits or clefts can become different things in different species. But those are the four things that must be found for a species to be classified in the chordate phylum. So the notochord is a longitudinal flexible rod between the digestive tube and the nerve cord. So again, you can see it's this orange color here. It provides the skeletal support throughout most of the length of the chordate. In most vertebrates, a more complex jointed skeleton develops and the adult retains only remnants of the notochord. So this would be the tissue that would ultimately become the skeleton if you're talking about Homo sapiens and other more complex vertebrates. You can see again the thicker yellow tube above the notochord is the dorsal hollow nerve cord. This nerve cord develops into the central nervous system. And remember, central nervous system is what makes up the most abundance of the nervous system in most animals, and chordates, the central nervous system, primarily composed of the brain and the spinal cord. The other type of nervous system that we have in Homo sapiens is the peripheral nervous system, which is any of the neurons and other structures that are found outside of the brain or the spinal cord. The pharyngeal slits or clefts in all of these chordate embryos. Grooves form along the outer surface of the pharynx. Pharynx is the throat, or what will become the throat. And these grooves are described as pharyngeal clefts. In most chordates, these grooves will develop into pharyngeal slits that will open to the outside of the body. So the pharyngeal clefts are those that will stay inside of the body. The pharyngeal slits are those that will open to the outside of the body. So that's the difference between the two. The pharyngeal slits or clefts will become different things in different species, as I mentioned. They can be suspension feeding structures in some of the invertebrate chordates. They can be important for gas exchange in vertebrates, except for the tetrapods. In us, they actually, species like us, they will go on to be developed into parts of the ear, head, and neck in tetrapods. The last derived characteristic in chordates is the muscular postanal tail. So the tail is posterior to where the anus is found. In many species, the tail is greatly reduced during embryonic development, including us. So we do start off with a tail. It does retract and come back inside of the body, and ultimately becomes smaller and smaller. It is left over and seen as our tailbone, which is called the coccyx in our vertebral column. So the tail often contains skeletal elements and muscles. And in aquatic species, really important for allowing movement, so a propelling force to help them move forward. So some more concepts. The vertebrates are chordates that have a backbone. The skeletal system and complex nervous system have allowed for vertebrates to be very good at two essential tasks. These essential tasks that vertebrates must be good at to allow for survival of the species is capturing food and evading predators. So we'll start with a group called chondrichthyans. These are species including sharks, rays, and their other relatives. They have a skeleton that's composed primarily of cartilage, which is different than us. Chondro means cartilage. Our skeleton is composed of bone. So osteoblasts create osteocytes, which are bone cells in us. But these chordates are chondrichthyans, have a skeleton composed of cartilage. So the largest and most diverse group of this chondrichthyans is sharks, rays, and skates. There are others, smaller numbers of species, ratfishes or chimeras. So here again, looking at where we are, here's your chondrichthyes. So again, sharks, rays, and skates. So here's an example, again, of some of these that fall into the chondrichthyan category. Sharks, we know, are very similar to the body style of dolphins and other larger mammals, like some particular whales. But sharks, remember, are not closely related to mammals. They're more closely related to fish. They have a very streamlined body and they're very fast swimmers. They have dorsal fins that function as stabilizers and paired pectoral and pelvic fins that are used for maneuvering and directional movement. Sharks are one of those species that need to continually swim to keep themselves from sinking and also to maintain continuous flow of water over the gills. If they don't have continuous flow of water over the gills, then they will not receive the oxygen that's required by their cells, and ultimately they will die. Largest sharks are suspension feeders, but most are carnivores. So those very big suspension feeders would be whale sharks are a good example of that. They have very acute senses, including sight, smell, and the ability to detect electrical fields. And all of these sensors are necessary for their carnivorous lifestyle. All shark eggs are fertilized internally, but the embryos go on to develop in different ways. Some sharks are described as oviparous. The eggs will hatch outside of the mother's body. Ovoviviparous, the eggs are retained within the oviduct, and the young are born after hatching within the uterus. And then the last one is viviparous. The embryo develops within the uterus and is nourished from the mother's blood through a yolk sac placenta. So again, one of the features that is similar to what we might find in mammals. So all internal fertilization, but then development of those embryos and the hatching will be different based on different species. So ray-finned fishes and lobe fins. The vast majority of vertebrates are described as osteichthyans. They are a group that has a bony endoskeleton. So the bones, instead of the cartilage like we saw in the skates, rays, and sharks. So this will include bony fishes and tetrapods, which of course we are one of. Aquatic osteichthyans are the vertebrates that we would informally call fish. And that would be these groups here. Most fishes breathe by drawing water over their gills, which is protected by an operculum. So that's similar to the sharks that need to draw water over their gills for allowing oxygen to get into those cells. Fish are really good at controlling their buoyancy, how shallow or deep they're swimming in the water. They use a swim bladder, which is an air sac. Air sacs are able to be inflated by adding air to it. It's going to make the fish more buoyant. It's going to rise to closer to the surface. And if you start to empty the air out of that swim bladder, then the fish will begin moving towards the bottom of the water. The skin secretes mucus and is covered by scales in most fish, which are protective. And most species are oviparous, but some have internal fertilization and birthing. So they have internal fertilization and then they lay the eggs that will then ultimately hatch. Some fish guard their eggs to make sure as many eggs will make it to hatching. Some do not. Again, it's all a numbers game really to see how many individuals will be born and make it onto reproduction. So this is again showing some examples of some of the structures that we were talking about. So nostrils, brain, spinal cord, here are the gills, heart, liver, kidney. Again, there's the swim bladder, the gonads, stomach, intestine, anus, the fins, again, which allow for movement. The caudal fin is for propulsion, as we talked about in sharks as well. So tetrapods have diversified greatly after they moved on to land. So again, the first examples of these osteichthyans were those that developed and evolved in water. Then again, once they moved on to land, there was a great number of new niches or areas that opened up. So that allowed for a greater number of species to evolve. The derived characteristics of tetrapods are some examples here. 4 limbs, that's again tetrapod is foot, 4 limbs with 4 forelimbs and feet that have digits. They have a neck, which allows for separate movement of the head, fusion of the pelvic girdle to the backbone, absence of gills. There are some tetrapods that are aquatic species or amphibious, and then ears for detecting airborne sounds. So think about what it sounds like when you are underwater. Very difficult to hear anything because our ears are evolved for hearing sound waves, disturbances of um, the airwaves that make it into our ear. Ultimately, the vibrations will allow for movement of the eardrum, the tympanic membrane, which allows for signals to be sent back to the auditory nerve. We saw this in one of the Shape of Life videos that we watched, but there had to be some sort of intermediate species that used to live in the water, um, had some of the characteristics of tetrapods, but then was able to move out of the water and start living on the land. Um, Tiktaalik is that particular example. Again, traits that it shares, this particular intermediate fossil that it shares with fish include the fins, gills, lungs, and scales. Again, we already watched this video talking about how they discovered this particular fossil in their, I think it was their fourth time going to look for fossils. So they were happy that they were able to find this sort of intermediate fossil, which often we're not able to find. So it was a really profound and exciting find. Again, some of the characteristics that they were looking for in those fossils, or this particular intermediate fossil: eyes on top of the skull, a flat skull, a neck, some ribs that were found there. And then their fins structures looked very similar to the type of bones and organization of the bones that we would find in limbs of animals that live on land. So again, very similar to the fins that we found in Tiktaalik. This is again showing you some evolution of arm bones here. So humerus is the bone at the top of your arm, connected to your shoulder, and then the radius and the ulna are below your elbow, which connect to your wrist. And again, you can see that these bones have evolved and changed. These are all fishes. Again, you can see there were limbs that with digits that evolved. Now we have amphibians, again, which are going to have structures very similar to ours. And that's it for part 1. So make sure you watch the rest of chapter 34 video recordings. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've learned a lot. And let me know if you have any questions. Thanks. Bye-bye.